What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Detroit Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford and why he will have the best season of his career in 2020, and also why that could lead to him getting some awards. Let's get it started. All right, everyone, welcome into the video. I'm glad you guys are here. Now, before we get into it, I gotta do a couple of tasks, a couple of house chores before we get this thing started. So the first thing is this: go in the description and follow Fan Network on both Instagram and Twitch. Those are the two main places you need to follow Fan Network. You could definitely go follow them on Twitter or other places, but those are the two main places. Big things are coming July 4th. You're gonna want to be a part of it. I'm telling you. So don't miss out. Go follow the Fan Network on both Instagram and Twitch. You don't have to do it now. You can do it when you're in Cheerios later. I don't know what you do at night, but definitely go follow them. I mean, hey, it's easy. You're just going to want to be a part of it. It's free. It's easy. You're going to want to be a part of it. Now, I also got to say this. If you haven't seen why the Lions could be the next Saints video, 1, what are you doing? 2, what are you doing? And 3, what are you doing? Because seriously, you got to be checking out those videos. But it's okay. You know, I ain't going to be mad at you because you can go check it out later. So it's all good. However, I did make a little point in that video, and it is this. There is really no specific blueprint on how to become a successful team in the NFL. There's no one way, there's no one size fits all. You can be a good playoff team / successful team in many different ways by being good at different things. Some teams aren't great at anything. They're just good at everything and they don't have a lot of weaknesses. Some teams are great at running the football. Some teams have a great defense. Some teams have a great passing game. There's so many different ways to be successful in this league, which is really awesome. That's what makes the NFL so great. And in 2019, an interesting stat is this: the top 4 teams in passing yards did not make the playoffs. The top 4 teams in passing yards did not make the playoffs. Now, I believe that 5th was the Chiefs, and obviously they won a Super Bowl, but the top 4 teams didn't even make the playoffs. But I think that will change in 2020. Maybe other teams, get into that and make the playoffs. But I think another team that will get into that is the Detroit Lions, and I think they could definitely be a playoff team in 2020. So today we're talking about why Matthew Stafford could have the best season of his career. Actually, not even could, will. I'm telling you, he will have the best season of his career in 2020. Now, before we get into anything, I gotta just kind of remind you of what Matthew Stafford really was last season. I think some people know he was good, all right? Some people might even think he was great, but they don't know that he was actually phenomenal when this dude was healthy. All right, so what we're going to do is this. Matthew Stafford played in exactly half the season, 8 games. So we're going to take his numbers, and we're going to multiply them by 2. We're just going to double it. Keep it 16. That's fair. And then let's look at those numbers. And let's see where those numbers would have compared to himself. How great was last year to any of his other years? I mean, you can compare him to other players if you want. It was really good. But let's compare it to himself, just so you can get a really good feel. What last year's stats would have been in 16 games to himself. Now, we're going to exclude 2010 because, again, in 2010, he only played in like 3 games, and I don't think that's fair to count that. Other 10 years, 2009 to 2019, again, excluding 2010, let's look at where he ranks amongst himself statistically last season if he would have played in all 16 games. So let's start off with passing attempts. Matthew Stafford would have finished 7th in passing attempts. 7th. Okay, well, that's not that crazy. 7th in passing attempts? That's actually kind of low. Probably lower than what you'd expected after I just gassed him up. All right, well, he's got to show me some big things then, because 7th is not that impressive. How about completion percentage? 5th. All right, 5th. That's okay. I guess that's all right. That's middle of the pack. Still not that crazy, though. That's not his best year. However, let's look at the rest of them. All right, how about yards? Well, 2nd. He would have been 2nd to the 2011 season where he threw for over 5,000 yards. He was on pace for 4,998 yards, which is basically 5,000. That's really good. Okay, well, how about touchdowns? 2nd. He would have thrown 38 touchdowns. Again, obviously the averages were the same. Obviously that can change a little bit, but from what we know, he was on pace for 38 touchdowns because in 8 games he had 19. His best season ever was 2011 where he had 41. All right, well, that's pretty darn close. Maybe not as good as 2011 yet. However, let's continue to look. How about interceptions? Well, he would have been tied for first with only 10. Only 10. 2011, he threw 16. So he's more efficient because he had the 7th most passing attempts, which is not a lot, right? 7th, that's just the 3rd lowest. But he still had 2nd in yards and 2nd in touchdowns with possibly the least amount of picks. All right, well, that's I can't really argue with that. How about yards per attempt? 1st. Yards per completion? 1st. Passer rating? 1st. Okay, well, I think at this point you get the picture. Matthew Stafford was great. If he would have played in all 16 games, he would have been looked at a lot better than what a lot of people look at him as, okay? Even though some people think he was great, Quarterback Index had him ranked like 7th or 8th in the league after the season, and only 8 games played. Matthew Stafford was a heck of a player. I also throw this out there. It was tied for 6th in sacks. That's a little curveball, I guess. I don't really know. 3rd and 4th quarter comebacks because you would have had 4 if you'd have multiplied 2 by 2. But that stuff's not important. The other stats are really what we're looking at. His stats for 2019, if he would have played all 16 games, would have been this, assuming the averages would have stayed the same. 38 passing touchdowns to 10 interceptions. On 582 passing attempts, a 64.3% completion percentage, 4,998 yards, a 106 pass rating, and 8.6 yards per attempt, which would be 312 passing yards per game, which would have been first in the league. And I believe 38 touchdowns would have also been first in the league. Like, oh my gosh, does that not tell you how great he was? Okay, so he was good in 2019, you get that. But what does that have to do with 2020? Why will that translate to 2020? Why will next year be his best year ever? Well, one, if he stays healthy. If he stays healthy, like I said, last year would have been the best year ever. He played in all 16 games. But he has to stay healthy. That's like the main X factor. However, it's really important to see what they did in the offseason, right? The Detroit Lions lose pieces. Did they gain pieces, right? What big moves they make? Because you're always going to lose spots. You're always going to gain spots. So did the Lions improve on the roster on paper so that he can have a great season in 2020? Well, let's look at what they did on the roster. The pieces that they lost, the main piece they lost was Graham Glasgow, who is a right guard. Okay. They lost a right tackle, Rick Wagner, who they cut. And they lost J.D. McKissick, who's actually a nice receiving back. Very underrated. 34 receptions. Come on, don't sleep on him. But the two main moves were Graham Glasgow and Rick Wagner leaving. Now, Detroit Lions cut Rick Wagner, so they obviously didn't think it was a big deal to move on from him. I didn't either. Rick Wagner was not very good for Lions. Graham Glasgow was a pretty big loss because he was one of our best offensive linemen on the team, and he was one of the most consistent offensive linemen that could play every single interior offensive line position. The Detroit Lions probably tried to fix that in the draft by bringing in Jonah Jackson and Logan Stenberg in the 3rd and 4th rounds of the draft. Okay, so they tried to fix that. And at right tackle, they brought in Big V, who's never been a pure starter for the Eagles, but he's been behind 2 of the best tackles in the league year in and year out, so he's never really had a chance to take over the starting role. Big Versatile, that's his nickname, can play both tackle positions and the guard positions. But it's going to look like he's probably going to move to that right tackle position, and if not be better, at least be as good as Rick Wagner was, much younger. Okay, so I think the offensive line, it may have got a little bit worse, a little bit more improving, but it still seems like it's still going to be okay because last year they did rank 11th in the league. That's pretty darn good. How about the weapons? I told you lost J.D. McKissick, who had 34 receptions. Oh, that's tough, but they pretty much just added after that. I mean, that's all they did. They had a Quintez Cephas, who honestly they didn't even need to bring in, but they did. Quintez Cephas out of Wisconsin, who's a really good at catching the football. May not be the fastest, maybe not the most explosive. Dude can catch the football. At the end of the day, that's the quarterback's job, is to catch the ball. That's what he does at a high level. You brought Geronimo Allison. May not make the team. I don't know, but he's going to compete. Jeremy Davis, again, may not make the team. I don't know. He's going to compete. So wide receiver, you added a couple of depth pieces because you didn't need starters. You have Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, and Danny Amendola. You didn't need any starters. Now you just added some more depth pieces. Well, you didn't lose anybody. You still have T.J. Hockenson. You still have Jesse James. T.J. Hockenson, by the way, going into year 2, which is when tight ends take off. I won't even mention it. And they also went and had Hunter Bryant. And Isaac Nauta is still here. But Hunter Bryant, who was potentially the best undrafted free agent available, that a lot of people would have said that, yeah, this guy should have been drafted. Okay, what did you do at the running back spot? Well, you didn't lose any pieces other than J.D. McKissick, where you added Jason Huntley, who I think is basically the next J.D. McKissick. But you also added DeAndre Swift, who is arguably the best pass-catching running back in this draft, if not second to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Okay, so you're telling me you did pretty good. Yeah, the roster looks pretty good. Last season was really good. And you're bringing back the one main X factor, which is Darrell Bevell, who stepped in in 2019. His first year, by the way. Last year was the first year as Lions offensive coordinator for Jim Bob Cooter. And Matthew Stafford was not good in 2018. He had arguably the worst year of his career. In 2018, Matthew Stafford threw for less than 4,000 yards for the first time in a long time. And the Lions were 6-10, really because the offense let them down for the first time in a long time. But 1 year later, a new offensive coordinator, and Matthew Stafford has maybe the best year of his career if he would have stayed healthy. Wow, what a difference an offensive coordinator definitely does make. So what you're telling me is that they have the pieces. Matthew Stafford was great, and Darrell Bevell's returning. He should be great. He definitely should. It's all going to come down to whether or not he's healthy. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all it is. And I believe he will be healthy, okay? Now, let's get back to that awards part. How can Matthew Stafford win awards? It's pretty simple. I don't like the Pro Bowl. I hate the Pro Bowl, okay? I just hate how they let players into it and what players get into the Pro Bowl. It's not necessarily that I hate that players come together and they get to play, but who they pick makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, even this, I could argue this shouldn't have even been a thing. In 2014, the only year Matthew Stafford has ever been a Pro Bowl player, Matthew Stafford had, I could say, arguably a below average year out of his 10. I could probably say that. I could probably make a case that 5 years were better than 2014. Yeah, he was in the Pro Bowl. Why? I have no idea. Well, actually, I do know. Because they went 11-5. That's the only reason he was in the Pro Bowl, because they went 11-5. It's all about team success. That's all it is. Win awards. That's all it is. Matthew Stafford won the comeback player in 2011. the Comeback Player of the Year award in 2011. Now, he was great. He was great. But they were also 10-6. So my point is this. If Matthew Stafford could make the Pro Bowl in 2014, and he wasn't that great, but they were successful, then it's pretty obvious how he's going to win awards for the Detroit Lions. It's like this. If the Lions are successful, he will get recognized. I mean, that's really all it is. And if he's good and he had last year's stats, he may win the MVP. And I'll tell you why. The first thing is this. I have a really good feeling he's going to win the Comeback Player of the Year next year. He missed 8 games. So if he has a year like last year, he's probably guaranteed to win that award. Now, how about bigger awards? Well, MVP talk. How would he win the MVP? He's been in the MVP race before. 2016, the most recent time, because he had 8 fourth quarter comebacks and they were a playoff team last time they did the playoffs. He didn't win it, but he was in the race. But I guarantee you, I'm saying it right now, I guarantee you, if the Detroit Lions win a playoff game with Matthew Stafford healthy, he will win the MVP. Especially if he puts up last year's numbers. He will be an MVP player. He will win the MVP. Because it's just huge. It's not something the Lions do. They're not usually successful, okay? Lamar Jackson, the Ravens came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, he's the MVP. I'm not saying he was bad, but he's the MVP, right? He deserved it. It's big. It's about being successful. Think about this, for example. If the Browns won a playoff game with Baker Mayfield, would he not win the MVP if he was healthy the whole year? I'm sure he'd probably win the MVP, or at least he'd be really close. Same thing with Stafford. He would win the MVP if the Lions win a playoff game, okay? Because unless some team like the Dolphins do it, he's probably going to get it. Because he's a veteran, he's been in the league, he would have good numbers, and he would give the Detroit Lions their second playoff win in Super Bowl era. That's pretty wild. So that's how he can get awards. So there you go. Matthew Stafford will have the best season of his career in 2020. Thank you, Brad, for watching, and I'm out.